Okay, great. So thank you very much for the introduction. And it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to do this presentation on some of the research themes of the BioVision team at INRIA Center at University Côte d'Azur. And so our team's research theme is towards synergistic solutions for visually impaired people and artificial vision. And our team is composed of 3 permanent researchers, Dr. Bruno Sissak, who is the team leader of BioVision, Dr. Pierre Kornbrobs, and myself, Huiying Wu. And so the research themes in our team surround the question of human vision, how we can model it and understand it, what happens when people have visual impairments, how does that impact their lives and their behavior, and also what kind of technical solutions we can propose to help people who live with visual impairments. And so specifically, the BioVision team has 3 research axes. The first one is modeling of the retina and the primary visual system. The second one is diagnosis, rehabilitation, and low vision aids. And the third one is visual media creation and analysis. And each one of these research axes is linked to the main research of one of the permanents of this team. And so I'm going to give a kind of broad overview of the research in each of these axes. And so the first axis is modeling of the retina and the primary visual system. And so this is the research area of Dr. Bruno Sissak. And it comprises of 3 main projects that I'm going to talk about today. The first one is to develop mathematical models for neuroscience. And so the objective of this is to conceive models of neural activities of the visual system, to develop these mathematical methods and also numerical platforms that can be used to visualize and study these models. And then to propose new explanatory mechanisms and experiments that can be done, to study the effect of modifying physiological parameters such as drugs to induce the neural responses for different pathologies, and also to analyze the results in experiments. The main publications that are published in this area go to journals in physics, in mathematics, neuroscience, and computer science. So it's very multidisciplinary. And also there is a strong activity of developing software to visualize the mathematical models that are developed, such as PRANAS, which was developed in 2017, and Macular, which is a software that is ongoing in development. And so here there are some figures that show on the left, for example, the biological visual system where we have images that come into our eyes and are captured by the photoreceptors, processed by the bipolar cells, amacrine cells, and retinal ganglion cells, and then transmitted to the visual cortex. And we can see this system in a more mathematical or physics system, which is shown more on the center and on the right, where we can model the responses of the neurons as the stimulations in a physics model. And so it's kind of mathematical models that are inspired from the biological system. Another area of research in this axis is the model of the retina, where the PhD students involved in this research, and also collaborations with the Institut de la Vision, Institut des Neurosciences de la Timone, and also Neurosciences Sacré, have found that the retina is a very extraordinary piece of a biological tissue in our body, where there are actually high-level behaviors that are already processed at the retinal area. For example, to have motion anticipation. The retina can actually anticipate motion of objects in our visual field. It can deal with surprise when this motion is interrupted or out of the normal, and also saccadic suppression to allow us to maintain a visual perception even when our head and our eyes are moving. And so results to these parts of research are often published in journals for mathematics, neuroscience, and also a recent paper published in Nature Communications. And I mention here again the software Macular, which is under development. And on the right, you can see a screenshot of this software that allows the simulation of the mathematical models that are that are transported onto this platform so that we can see the actual neuronal stimulations of the models. And so here there are also some results on the visualization of the response of the visual cortex in response to different stimulus. For example, when the stimulus of a dot is moving up or down, how that activity is reflected in the visual cortex of a monkey. And so this part of the research concerns how do we take biological data and create models that allow to simulate the responses of the retina or of the visual cortex. And finally, there is also the research projects that concern retinal responses, stimulus, and also physiological parameters. And so that would include collaborations with Institut de la Vision, with Neuroscience Institute at Newcastle, and also a Center of Neuroscience in Valparaiso in Chile. And so the objective of this part of the work is to, for example, use retinal waves to simulate retinal waves, and also to simulate the effects of drugs on the retinal response and closed-loop stimulus responses. And so here there are some diagrams that show, for example, the responses of starburst amacrine cells inside the eye, and how drugs that are used to stimulate these neurons would theoretically respond how these neurons would respond. And so it's going from mathematics, these simulations that can inform experiments that can be done in biology. The second axis of the research concerns research of Dr. Pierre Conrad's, which is the vision screening, rehabilitation, and low vision aids. And so it concerns when the visual system has some problems, and specifically we're interested in low vision, which is visual impairments that cannot be relieved or corrected completely by existing medical procedures or lenses like glasses. And specifically in our team, we're interested in age-related macular degeneration, which is the loss of visual acuity in the central visual field. And so you can see a visualization of this on the figure on the right. And prospectively in 2040, there will be 288 million people worldwide living with low vision conditions, which introduces strong needs for diagnosis, for rehabilitations, and for accessibility design. And so one of the difficulties that low vision patients encounter is accessibility to text. And so one of the projects that is done by Dr. Conrad's is the INRIA project, which is to develop technology and interfaces that allow vision screening of reading performance. And so this involves standard texts that are in a certain format, a number of lines and characters with vocabulary that is certain length, as you can see in the figure on the right. And here there are some challenges because the number of texts that are available for these kinds of screenings is very, very limited due to the specific linguistic properties that are necessary for the screening tests. And also it requires dedicated equipment to do this kind of screening with patients. And so there are new approaches, for example, to develop tablet applications that are validated clinically to do vision screening, and also methods in linguistics to generate sentences, more varieties of sentences that can be used inside these studies in order to increase the variety of these tests such that they can be repeated over and over again in the future without the patients learning by heart what exactly is coming up. And so this is part of the INRIA project. There is also an area of work in rehabilitation in virtual reality. And so this is using technology that was introduced by my colleague Anatol earlier today, where we can use immersive environments to train strategies for patients, for example, to use their heads, to move their heads and point with their gaze and use the residual peripheral vision in order to see target objects. And so here there are many examples, for example, of protocols in virtual reality that allow the use of a head pointing in order to target objects in a certain area, as you can see in this video. There is also a lot of work that has been invested into this project to develop a software called PTVR, which is free and open source, that allows the creation of visual... Okay, thanks. That allows the creation of visual perception experiments using a Python interface.
C'est bien.
And finally, there is game development, for example, for rehabilitation. And finally, there is, in this same axis, there are low vision aids, for example, ways to reorganize and magnify newspapers to make it accessible to people living with low vision conditions. And so that involves reformatting the layout of articles and also its images and different kinds of content, and also conducting user studies that are currently ongoing for this project. And so here are some of the results of this work, where we can see that original newspapers can be magnified in different ways to allow the entry points, such as titles and content of the newspaper, more accessible for people who have problems accessing text. And finally, the third axis is visual media creation and analysis. And so it concerns research themes that are more linked to my own work. And specifically, we use a lot of virtual reality technologies because they present a very strong advantage in cognitive sciences to create ecological and multimodal environments that are immersive, and we can have various types of stimulus. And these provide the advantage of controlled environments that allow us to study dynamic interactions. And there's also a very strong potential to personalize the content for different needs and purposes. And so the main project that I am coordinating is called ANR Creative 3D, which is collaboration between the BioVision team and also clinical partners and partners in neuroscience and cognitive science, where the objective is to investigate the impact of low vision on navigation and interaction in virtual reality using ecological environments, and then to study and model multivariate user intention involving indices such as gaze, emotion, and motion. And also finally, to develop assistive creativity tools that we can use, for example, to create personalized virtual reality rehabilitation scenarios. And so we publish mainly in conferences in human interactions, in media studies, but also in virtual reality. And so some of the work that we have done involves development of software that allow us to create ecological environments, such as road crossings in the case of this project, and contextually rich scenarios too, where the whole scenario is annotated with important indices. Where is the car? Where is the pedestrian crossing? What is the person doing at any moment inside the scene? And it allows us to study multimodal user behavior using gaze tracking, using physiological sensors, and also motion capture. And the results of this work have been published in open data sets, which we can also use for different purposes, such as statistical modeling in cognitive sciences, or using deep learning techniques to create predictive models of user behavior. So for example, here we show some predictive models of trajectory from gaze and motion, where we can see the impact of different cuts of data, where we can investigate that when we have models that are trained only on normal vision and simple tasks, they have difficulty generalizing to data that has, for example, simulated low vision conditions. And so it shows the impact also that of the models that we use currently in different applications, such as autonomous driving or other real-life applications, the impact of data bias that can have on these predictive models. And so there are a number of open software and data sets that have been developed in the context of this project, open data set, and also code examples for trajectory prediction that were trained on the data set that I mentioned. And finally, I would like to mention the last project that is called AMD Journey, which is the work of one of our PhD students, Joanna de la Chambre, where the objective is to use virtual reality to co-design with patients and experts VR experiences to raise awareness towards the impact of low vision conditions. And so we use a simulated gaze contingent scotoma, so visual field loss simulator, and co-designed with patients narrative scenarios where they showed the impact of low vision on social interactions. And so through these studies, we also saw that using a simulated scotoma, we can actually observe changes in the user's gaze behavior, where users, in order to see the faces of the people in the narrative scenes, they actually switch from central vision to using their peripheral vision in order to better see the social interactions. And that was something that was pretty interesting in this study. And so in conclusion, some of the future projects that we are working on in the different axes includes continuing the modeling of retinal pathologies and designing of stimulus for analysis and diagnosis and visual coding of motion. The second axis, there is continued work on vision screening through reading performance for clinicians, and also a framework for automatic layout creations with applications for journalist designers and newspaper reading apps. And in our third axis, there are directions in accessible transmedia design, AI-assisted creativity for text, video, extended reality, and also clinical applications of immersive storytelling. Thank you.